Hello, BookTube. I'm back to this library tour. The tail end of my library tour is Regency romances. Actually, romance novels just in general. The last few shelves of this are hundreds and hundreds of romance novels. The last bookcase. Once upon a time, this was a miscellaneous of a whole bunch of things, and before that, for years, it was this bookcase was the home of my Penguin Classics until their number expanded greatly. But now it's entirely taken over with romance novels of all kinds, but mostly Regency romances. These old style. Let me grab one for you. These old style romances from the late '80s, the '90s, and the early 2000s. I have a real sweet tooth for them. I really like them. Oh Bean, don't do that. Don't do that. You're on camera, little girl. That's so gross. Well, just try to pretend you don't see the unmentionable things my little schnauzer is doing in the background. So we're going to go through a few more of these Regency romances, and then we'll wrap up this entire bookcase and this entire library tour with some mainstream romances, some modern mainstream romances, because these things aren't made anymore. Nobody publishes these programmatic little things anymore that I know of. The closest you come is once a month. Harlequin romances, the venerable Harlequin romances, still does 4 historical novels every month. And one of those is usually Regency, sometimes more than one, but that's it. And even those don't bear any strong resemblance to these old-fashioned ones. So let's take a look through these. You've all been very indulgent of this little weird side interest of mine. So I won't prolong this forever. We'll do a few more of these, and then we'll finish up with mainstream Regencies and just general romance novels. So this first one is April Kihlstrom. I really like her. And this is The Counterfeit Betrothal. A more incompatible couple than Lord Jeremy Barnett and Miss Emmeline Delwyn could not be found in the realm. Jeremy was the most scandalously successful rake in London. His escapades were infamous, his conquests legion, and his conscience totally lacking. Emmeline was a well-brought-up young lady who had devoted herself to caring for her infirm father, far from society's pleasures and temptations. But now their respective parents had decreed that the two must wed, and both the libertine lord and the perfectly proper miss agreed to defeat this plan if only Jeremy could keep his pledge to resist Emmeline's untouched beauty, and if Emmeline could hold fast her vow not to yield to love. This is an April Kihlstrom novel that I read. I really enjoyed it. Very funny. Her books have very playful humor running throughout them. Most of them do. This next one is another April Kihlstrom. This one I haven't read. It's in rough shape. It would need to be reinforced before I read it. This is A Choice of Cousins. Classic old-style graceful cover. Edward Fambro, Earl of Danver, made no secret of the contempt he had for women, and Sarah Farthingham was equally outspoken in her dislike for arrogant men. There was, in fact, only one thing these natural enemies agreed on. They should have nothing to do with each other. Unfortunately, however, one little detail stood in the way of their perfect parting of the ways. They were pledged to become man and wife. So you see that April Kihlstrom has a little bit of a theme here. Bean, what are you doing? Should you leave yourself alone, baby? Oh, I swear. You are an itchy baby today. Oh. Take a peek. It's a very hot and humid day here, believe it or not. Despite being mid-December, it's warm and it's humid. It's shirt-sleeve weather, and the humidity bothers Frida. But everything about the weather bothers Frida. A perfectly dry, nice, and bright spring day suits her right down to the ground. But cold weather, wet weather, damp weather, noisy weather, she's an indoor dog. Let's see. Okay, this next one's another April Kihlstrom. This is The Wary Spinster. All the subdued colors on the cover there. Anthea Marwood had grown up under the shadow of a brutal father who believed that virtue was to be beaten into young girls. Freed of him at last, she vowed never to place herself in the power of a man again, and above all, certainly not a man like Viscount Giles Radbourne, whose conquests were as notorious as his wealth and charm were famous, and who certainly was not in need of another partner for his pleasure. But how could the jaded Viscount resist the challenge of a lady who vowed never to give herself to any man? And we have someone digging her way down into the mantle of the planet. This will sometimes go on for half an hour. I never have the heart to tell her that she's not doing anything. It's not getting anywhere. It's hardwired in. Okay, so this is another April Kihlstrom. This is Captain Rogue. You're going to want to see the antics there, so I'll just read you off camera. I'm not offended. Believe me, I know who the star is here. When beautiful young heiress Miss Mary Farnham ran away from a home that had become intolerable, she knew she ran certain risks. But nothing in her innocent life had prepared her for so dangerous a dilemma as Captain Randall Carswell. Was this most mysterious gentleman a hero or villain, a savior or seducer? Did he pluck her out of harm's way as a kindly gesture, or merely to gain an unbreakable hold over her? And we run the risk here. You have the stereotypical old-style Regency cover, classic background. Nice. It's a nice painting. It doesn't work out well in the dodgy lighting here, but these things all have sedate, graceful little paintings on them. The older ones do. And we run the risk here with a little bit of an unfair risk with April Kihlstrom or with any of these authors by reading the summaries of so many of their novels in a row. Because you have to figure, even the most inventive writer will have similarities in their work, especially in so corseted a genre as these old styles. Okay, this is an older one. I bet this is 90s. Oh no, 1984. Good Lord. Hence the hairstyles. This is A Novel Alliance by Ellen Fitzgerald. That's our couple right there. Miss Verity Stratton was enchantingly beautiful, the belle of London season. To add to this, Verity was bearer of one of England's proudest names and heiress to one of the realm's greatest fortunes. Even better, she was ardently courted by Derek Vane, Marquis of Unger, whose incredible good looks, eminent title, and vast wealth made him the perfect match for her as far as he and all the rest of society were concerned. So there'll be someone else, and he'll end up being a better match. But Verity longed for the one thing that even the magnificent Marquis could not willingly give, a frightfully scandalous freedom that no proper young lady should want. And to get it, she is willing to risk everything she had, and far more than she could afford to lose, as she entered a novel alliance. Okay, this is another Ellen Fitzgerald. This is Rogue's Bride. They are by a lakeside. Ariadne, another Ariadne. Good Lord, we saw one of those last time. Caswell Drake has little choice when she wed Sir Eden, that's I-D-E-N, Peveril. She was an inexperienced chit of a girl, and he was a very experienced man of the world, and 2 nights alone with him on a lonely Greek isle was enough to make marriage a necessity, to step back from the brink of scandal. And that's a thing we've seen many times before. In these older Regencies, this is probably late 80s or early 90s, 1985. In these older Regencies, the man is always considerably older than the woman. And that we've seen, that as time goes on, as time passes, for even these old-style Regencies, that changes. The gap between the ages narrows until they're the same age. And also the looks. The man stops looking like the girl's father. They start looking like a young man and a young woman that are about the same age. And that carries over to the mainstream romances that we will see next time. Those stopped looking that way as well. So what do we got here? But that was 2 years ago. Okay, so their dalliance that made it necessary for them to marry was 2 years ago. Ariadne was now a woman, not a girl, and the whirligig world of London society offered her a far more attractive and attentive partner than Sir Eden in the divine and devoted form of Sir Robert Heath. Good Lord, she's cheating on her husband. When Sir Eden returned from distant parts to claim Ariadne as his wife, he clearly was due for a surprise. But when Ariadne set out to defy her husband, who had always gotten any woman he wanted, so was she. Not quite sure how I can guess how that turns out. That's intriguing. Like so many of these walkthroughs of these Regencies, it makes me want to read every single one of them. Okay, here's Ellen Fitzgerald. This is A Streak of Luck. This came out in 1987, but despite having come out in 1987, it is a precursor of times to come, because the cover illustration shows 2 people who are roughly the same age. And that's interesting. That almost never happened in the 80s. It seemed a dream come true when handsome, charming Gervase Fenton, Lord Sayre, asked for Lady Rachel Villiers' hand in marriage. Not only did Rachel adore Gervase at first sight, but marriage to him would free her from the web of wicked slander that her devilishly beautiful, diabolically malicious stepmother was weaving around her. An evil stepmother. Only after the marriage took place did Rachel learn that it had come about because of a game of cards between her father and Fenton, a game in which Fenton had lost. Her father thought he had won her happiness. Instead, she faced heartbreak on the horns of a dilemma that gave her the choice of sacrificing her pride if she remained with the infuriating Fenton, or embracing ruin by fleeing this man she could neither trust nor bring herself to stop loving. Oh my. Oh my. Okay, this is another Ellen Fitzgerald. This was one of the ones when I used to talk to my customers all the time about romance novels, even before I read them and liked them. I only wished that I knew that I'd been a romance fan when I had these conversations. But whether or not I liked romance novels, I loved my romance customers. I absolutely did. They were some of my favorite people. And I used to talk to them about these authors and say, you know, are there any that you like? Or if there's one that you really like and you're a little bit old or feeling a little bit sick, you want me to set something aside for you so that it doesn't get cleared out at the end of the month, just let me know. And as a result, I learned a lot about what they thought of these books. And this Ellen Fitzgerald novel, this was from the late 80s as well, I believe, 1987. This Ellen Fitzgerald novel, more than a few of my romance customers said they really liked it, that they thought it was much better than her normal. I have not read enough Ellen Fitzgerald so that I'd be able to tell, and I haven't read this book. But I always remember that. It'll make me extra curious when I do get to it. This is Romany Summer. Beautiful chestnut-haired Felicity Carruthers was little more than a girl when a thwarted elopement with a young man she loved left her with loss of both her love and her reputation. Felicity is now older and wiser. Never again would a man, no matter how attractive, tempt her to folly. Especially a man like Sir Lionel Graves, whose notoriety as the most handsome and high-living rake in London gave her fair warning of what to expect when he turned his charms upon her. But forewarned was not forearmed, as this young lady, who already lost her reputation, discovered when she tried not to lose her heart. It sounds to me very similar to other Ellen Fitzgerald novels, but my customers said otherwise, very much so. When I will bear that in mind when I get to it, and I will doff my hat to them. All of them are, I'm sure, long dead. But we had great times. It was an honor to have them as my customers, and to do whatever they wanted. A lot of them, once we got to know each other, once we got to talk to each other, a lot of them would actually ask me, well, I don't know if this is, if the company will allow you to do this. And I would just laugh and say, I don't care at all what the company wants me to do or not do. Just tell me what your request is, and it'll be up to me, not the company. And as a result, I did everything I could for them. When they became housebound, I bought their books and walked them over to wherever they happened to live, or took the subway to wherever they happened to live. If they wanted books held aside, whether that happened to be the policy of the company at the moment or not, I would hold them aside. They wanted books retained after the period in which they could be stripped of their front cover and sent back to the publisher for a full refund, I would do that. And some of them had been asking this request of booksellers for years and been turned down, and had the process explained to them so many times that they could actually ask me, well, you know, aren't you going to get in trouble? And I would say, no, I'm not going to get in trouble. And they would say, how can you be sure? And I would say, because I'm going to take the simple expedient of buying these books myself first, so they will be my property. And then when you're ready for them, we'll settle accounts. I never did let them settle accounts. That used to drive them crazy. These were all meticulous, old ladies who were, you know, young women during World War II, and thought they knew the proper way for things to be. But once I made them laugh, the fight was over and I had won. So this is another Ellen Fitzgerald. This is The Irish Heiress. When beautiful young Sheila Corbett was forced to leave her magnificent Irish estate to plunge into the London social whirl, she vowed not to be ensnared by the dashing dandies of the marriage mart. And when she met the notorious Lord Rand, she was sure he was precisely the kind of gentleman she should avoid. This infuriatingly arrogant aristocrat had a mistress whom he flaunted without shame. He had a skill at cards that enabled him to fleece Sheila's beloved brother Brian of his possessions without pity. Even worse, Rand was rich enough to make Sheila know it was not only her fortune he wanted, but herself as well. But she will end up falling for him, all the same, and also making a better man of him. And then let's wrap this up. Let's wrap this up with on one more Ellen Fitzgerald. This one takes place in winter, Good Lord. Takes place in winter. There's snow all over the ground. Oh my. Big storm brewing on all the models for the middle of America and heading inexorably towards the East Coast. I don't right now know what to make of the figures that I'm seeing. A lot of the 3 of the models that I'm following for this big storm are all unified in saying that the temperature on the East Coast, especially Washington and on up to Maine, is not going to be cold enough for snow. So that what we're going to get in midweek is just a drenching downpour. But one of the models says snow and lots of it, and that model is the only one to say that. But it has a nagging tendency to be right. I don't know. We're still too far out, so I will check all day tomorrow and see whether or not we're going to get ground covered in snow like this thing. There's a potential for this storm to dump lots of snow on Boston. Sooner or later, a storm is going to do that. I mean, we're in mid-December. Sooner or later, that's going to happen. I just dread it. I have a tiny little dog who doesn't like to go outside. I don't like to go outside, and I hate the mess. I mean, snow is pretty while it's coming down, but then after that, you have 5 days of a mess. Anyway, this is Lessons in Love, now that I'm done with my old person ranting. Miss Diana Forsyth was prepared for almost anything but this from Sir Sabin Mallory. Her heart had melted at her first meeting with this handsome lord, newly arrived in London, and she was prepared to be his guide in the ways of the world and society. Now he asked her to be still more. He asked her to help him win the heart and hand of Lady Aurora Marchant, the most irresistible and haughty beauty in London. As a young lady of breeding, Diana could not bring herself to refuse Sir Sabin's heartfelt request, but as a young woman of feeling, she had to find a way to cure the lovesick lord of the folly of loving anyone but her. I love it. We've talked about that pattern before as well, that often there will be some sort of arrangement. You're a licentious lord, you will teach me, an innocent maiden, the ways of the world. Or you're a sheltered lord, and I am an experienced courtesan in London, and I will teach you the ways of the world. Or I, an imperious lord who's sworn off women, has an ailing sister or an ailing mother who needs a companion, and you need a job, so you can have the job, but of course there'll be nothing between us. A lot of times there will be an arrangement that the author can just work mercilessly for the whole course of the book, and then of course it turns out that the arrangement is forever. But anyway, that is the end of our Regency romances. There are hundreds and hundreds and hundreds more. I appreciate your forbearance here, but we're going to move on from these Regencies, because otherwise there's no way. We couldn't do them all in the rest of the year. Even if I did 10 at a time, there wouldn't be enough time. So we're gonna stop. That was a good enough sampling, and I can't thank you enough. So tomorrow we will finish up this bookcase and this library tour with an overview of much more modern romance novels, the type that you see me get in the mail. And then we'll be done. So thank you again, BookTube, for this, and I will be back. So long.